All right, thank you so much. Welcome to another episode of the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast. My name is Fred Diamond. I'm the author of Love, Hope, Lyme, what family members, partners, and friends who love a chronic Lyme survivor need to know. And Terri McCormick, over 85 Love, Hope, Lyme podcasts. You, of course, can find the podcast on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, leave a comment. Terri, sometimes we've gotten dozens of comments from people, and I know our guests will go back like you and answer questions people may have. If you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, thank you so much. Give us a 5-star review. We greatly appreciate it. And I just want to remind our listeners that even though we're talking about Lyme disease and tick-borne disease today, this show does not replace proper medical care. So if you're struggling with Lyme disease, co-infections, or anything else, please seek proper medical care. So I'm very excited today. We're going to be doing the first of a couple of shows with Terri McCormick. And Terri, it's great to see you. Terri's the author of a book. It's called Being Misdiagnosed. And I'm showing that to people here on YouTube. And Terri, I give you a lot of credit. It's what you basically did is you brought on people and we're going to bring on one of your featured chapter, someone who was featured in one of your chapters in a second or two, Alex, who goes very, very deep into her Lyme history. And she's going to be talking about things that she went through and actually some very challenging moments that she went through as well. But I applaud you for publishing the book. You, in the first chapter, talk about your family's experience with Lyme disease. So give us a little bit of a taste on why you chose to write this book at this time.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, Fred. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the book and also to bring on Alex with me today. So my journey really started years ago, about 2004, with my children and them being misdiagnosed and kind of that long journey. And as I was going through that journey, I became more of an advocate and learned more and more about Lyme disease. I met more and more people and a lot of people with chronic illness, different chronic illnesses. And I would say, hey, I think that, that symptom sounds very similar to one of my children's or to somebody else's. Or did you know that Lyme disease is called the great imitator? And I started meeting more and more people like that and would turn them on to doctors that could do proper testing, because we know that not all testing is valid or good. And there's many reasons why people don't test positive for tick-borne illnesses. But as I was going on, I thought, I've read stories here and there in different advocacy groups, and I thought, why don't I put all of these together into a book and also weave in some research into the book so that it can explain what's going on. Because actually, there is a lot of research out there on how tick-borne illness can be the great imitator.
Yeah. And the story we're going to be talking to Alex about, she goes through almost like a greatest hits of things that we've talked about throughout the history of the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast. And as I'm reading her story, every paragraph, something new comes up, and I'm like, that makes so much sense. And then 2 paragraphs later, something else comes up. I do want to tell people that definitely pick up the book because Terri, you do go into detail about what your family went through. And, I've gotten to meet you in person at iLads and a couple of other places, and we've spoken about your history and with your children. And, God bless them and God bless you for everything that you've gone through. And I'm very excited for you for this book. I look forward to many, many people reading it. So again, this is the first of a couple of shows that we're going to do with you and people who are focused and featured in your book. Why don't you give us a little bit of an intro to Alex? And then Alex, I'm going to start asking you to go into some more detail on some of the things you talked about in your chapter.
So it has been the pleasure of my life to get to know Alex and for her to tell me her whole entire story. I feel like she's one of my own children. She's a brilliant young girl that was at the University of Chicago and studying there, and she was seeking answers. And matter of fact, at the beginning of her chapter, which is chapter 7 in the book, there's 3 pictures of bullseye rashes. And this is a young person who obviously very bright, could do some research on her own, went to doctors in a large metropolitan city, and was basically they missed the rash over and over again. So multiple doctors. So this is her story and how it kind of progresses from these missed rashes through her whole entire chapter, her whole to where she is today.
All right. So, Alex, thanks for being here. It's great to see you. And wow, we're going to talk about what you discussed in the chapter. And I want to have our listeners prepared because you went through a lot of trauma to, sorry,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, absolutely.
just thinking about the chapter. So, tell us a little bit about, well, Terry mentioned misdiagnosis. And again, the telltale sign of Lyme is almost always the bullseye rash. And tell us a little bit about what your experiences were when you began to first get your misdiagnoses.
Sure, yeah. So I was a high achieving student at the University of Chicago when my health slowly but also quickly began to unravel. And what turned out to be a classic Lyme rash was repeatedly dismissed by multiple doctors, as Terry has said and is in the book. And over the next several years, I developed several severe sleep dysfunction symptoms, psychiatric symptoms, debilitating fatigue, cognitive issues, and eventually neuropsychiatric symptoms that almost cost me my life. And I was finally diagnosed with Lyme disease and co-infections. And my story became not just about illness, but more about learning to trust myself when the medical system repeatedly invalidated what was happening in my body.
Yeah, and you go. I just applaud you for the detail that you went through here and what you had gone through. Well, let's kind of cover some of the things that you talked about. Sleep disorders. So give us some insights. Again, we have a lot of people listening who are either chronic Lyme survivors or their parents of children who have chronic Lyme, like Terry. Tell us some of the insights about sleep disorders. How did that appear? You talk about in the chapter how, that was like for a long time some of the main problems that you were challenged with. And you went a whole bunch of different ways. Give us some insights into that whole experience.
Absolutely. And I still am working on my sleep rhythm today and figuring out my best sleep, my sleep chronotype. I wear an Aura ring to try and track my circadian rhythm and my natural genetic makeup. Because even before Lyme, I was a night owl, I will say. But when I was in college at the University of Chicago, what stood out to me that this was something not normal was that I would be staying up for days at a time and then would sleep for like 16 hours. Or my room, like I think this was written about in the book, my roommates would literally come wake me up and ask me, "Are you awake?" And I wouldn't trust myself to wake up for alarms. That was my first signal that like I lost trust in my body, like something bigger was going on.
So how did you, I'm just kind of curious, you talked about how you sometimes medicated for the sleep disorders and that provided further disruption through the process. How did that come about?
Absolutely. Well, getting through college, I was prescribed first Ambien to help me sleep, and that came with a host of psychiatric symptoms. And I will say the Northwestern Sleep Clinic did give me some goggles, like light goggles that I still use to this day, and getting sunlight and regular sunlight throughout the day is the best thing you can do for your sleep and circadian rhythm. Anyone and everyone will tell you um, that was great, but at the time when I had papers to get done, and we were on the quarter system, which is also a rushed. It's a lot more intense than the semester system in college. I would buy Adderall from people, and it just stimulants. That's how I felt like I could keep up with. I knew that I was not operating at the pace that I normally could, but I didn't know what was wrong. It just seemed to me, I just had the mentality of like, okay, it's a sprint. It's a sprint to the end and then I'm done. And in a way that was true, because when I graduated, I came home and I found the doctor who diagnosed me. Not that I would recommend that for anyone, and it's not healthy for any college student to operate at that level. It's not healthy for any student at all. It's way beyond our nervous system's capacity, our cognitive bandwidth, and yeah, that's a whole other tangent, but
Yeah.
question.
So Terry, sleep. What has been your experience with either yourself or your children with sleep challenges?
Oh, lots of sleep challenges. As a matter of fact, Dr. Horowitz in his best-selling book, that's one of the top things that he mentions in his book is that people with Lyme disease and tick-borne illness do have a lot of sleep issues. And then until you can get those sleep issues under control, you cannot heal, which is, what Alex also explained. Alex had a couple of diagnoses called she had sleep inertia, which Alex, do you remember? Do you want to explain what sleep inertia is?
Yes, sleep inertia, and think I think of it as a slash hypersomnia, which is your body just doesn't, it thinks you're still asleep.
Your brain's stuck in sleep even after waking.
Yes. And the first time I discovered sleep, or the first time I experienced sleep paralysis, it lasted 20 minutes, which is a very long time for sleep inertia or sleep paralysis to last. And that was terrifying. I think that was what really clued to me something is going on, because I woke up and I was paralyzed. I could not move. I had just slept for 16 hours. It was during finals, and I tried to, oh, sorry. I tried to get my body to like get up and go shower, go make food, and it wasn't responding. And it was a very scary experience.
So what Alex experienced is very common, I think, in Lyme disease patients or tick-borne illness, and that's that they can't fall asleep or they can't they can't get up. They never feel rested. It's a combination of those, those factors.
And at the time, I didn't know this at the time, but I was living in a moldy environment, which exacerbates all of those symptoms.
Yeah, talk a little bit about mold, and that's something that came up in your journey, and we hear about that a lot as well. And sometimes, people say that the mold is worse than the Lyme and the tick-borne infections. Give us some of your insights.
Absolutely. I mean, the way I think of mold is like if your body was a house, like your childhood home, and imagine you're going back to your childhood home, but it's become a haunted house, and everyone is screaming at you, and there's like ghosts and ghouls and all these creepy things popping out. Like that's how it felt to be in my body and brain when I was in mold at the worst of it. Like it made me slow, it made me paranoid, it made me angry, it made me feel all these emotions that I knew weren't mine, but they felt so intense. And that's compounded by EMF.
Yeah, I mean, for the mold, it's mold. I had Dr. Neil Nathan on the podcast, the Love Hope Lyme podcast, and I thought it was something unique. And he had, no, it's mold, black mold that you may find in your house. Terry, what are some of the things you've discovered about mold?
Yeah, I think if your immune system is hampered by tick-borne illnesses, you can't fight off mold. So somebody that might have a healthier immune system, maybe they have a more of a resistance. So that's why some people can and some people can't. But it definitely will make everything worse and makes your symptoms feel so much worse. So
Absolutely. And I got to the point where I couldn't go into buildings. And I had read about the DNRS and a lot of those sensitive patients. And I always thought to myself, I'm never going to be one of those sensitive patients until I was one, when I literally could not go into a building without having a reaction. Like I went to Vail with a group of friends and I had to leave early because I couldn't stay in the hotel room that we were staying in. I couldn't sleep. I felt like I was hyperventilating and I had anxiety, and I said, I know this is mold, and I could not be there.
Yeah,
and
I'm
Alex,
sorry.
your doctor also identified that you had to treat your mold first. When you finally got a Lyme literate doctor, who you have one of truly the best ones in the Denver area. Tell us a little bit about what he said about mold.
Yes, my memory is Dr. Prusmack. When I moved back to Denver after college, and they did a mycotoxin panel, genetic panel, uh, all kinds of, they took like 37 vials of blood and tested for everything. But the way he explained it to me and how I remember it is you have to treat mold before you can even test for Lyme. He had suspected Lyme because I had mentioned the rash. Because he does the classic MSID questionnaire, and all the ILADS questionnaires. But because there's so much inflammation, it's like it camouflages in blood tests, the immune system, and you won't get an accurate diagnostic. So I did a 6-month detox for mold before they even tested me for Lyme.
Yeah. One of the things we're going to talk in a second or two here about one of the places where you went to, very, very deep and dark. But before we get to that, I want to talk about, you talked about your relationship with your parents through this. And you talked about very bluntly about how expensive, and Terry, anybody listening to the Love Hope Lyme podcast will know how expensive
Yeah.
treating Lyme is when it gets into the chronic stage. Insurance companies won't touch it. Um, there's a whole bunch of reasons which we've covered in the past. But you talked about how your the relationship with your parents and how your father wanted you to go to a hematologist, and he wasn't very supportive of, not your father, but the hematologist wasn't very supportive of the fact that you might have Lyme, and you went through very, very challenging experiences with that. Um, Feel free to talk about whatever through that process you want to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So after we had finished the year-long protocol at Resilience Code, and this was in the same week I got accepted to law school. It was the same week that I got the Lyme results back from IGeneX. I believe it was IGeneX. And I was CDC positive for multiple strains of Borrelia. And at the I have to look back, but I was borderline for a lot of the co-infections like Babesia and Ricula. But later, flash forward to when I went to Sanofi, they all were positive. So my takeaway from that was honestly, if it's borderline, treat it. If it comes up as like it's this close, but it's not past the benchmark, you have it. Probably just treat it. It's there. Um, but so my my dad had had a different experience with this doctor because he wasn't seeing him for the same reasons. And it is a expensive practice. It's an investment in your health. And we just had very different, like I said, experiences, priorities, journeys. And of course, if you can get something covered by insurance, let's try and go that route. And so I did try and go to the hematologist that was also local, and he and Dr. Prusmack had collaborated on patients in the past, which is why we thought, okay, maybe this way, if he refers me to Dr. Prusmack, then it will be covered by insurance as a specialist. But when we got into it, they disagreed so strongly that he was not willing to collaborate on my case. And I had to ask him multiple times to test me for Lyme disease. He first tried to refer me to like a women's psychiatric group, psychiatrist, inpatient programs, all kinds of things, and repairing my gut, which in his defense, fair. I would also be hesitant to prescribe someone long-term antibiotics if I were not Lyme literate. Because he comes from a background of hematology and oncology, and yeah, long-term antibiotics do wreck your gut microbiome, but medical doctors are just not given Lyme literate training.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that generation is the takeaway I got,
Mhm.
unfortunately, and they want to help, but they don't know.
Yeah, they don't know. And Terry, you experienced a lot of that too with your children when they were having Lyme symptoms, and you're getting similar types of, maybe not from hematologists, but similar types of responses from doctors.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think it's, the acute stage of Lyme disease, that's what medical doctors are trained in. So they understand, okay, you get bit by a tick and maybe you have a rash, maybe you don't. But their training's very light. And because we don't even in the United States recognize the word chronic Lyme disease, they don't teach that in medical schools. Not typically. We're getting there. Where some doctors there's more training and stuff like that. And that's why I really believe in organizations like the International Lyme and Associated Diseases Society, ILADS, and I'm an ILADS ambassador for that reason. I feel like these doctors they go the extra mile to figure these things out, and they understand the complexities. Tick-borne illness shows up in so many different ways. And so yeah.
So, Alex, one thing that we talk about on the Love Hope Line podcast from time to time is that one of the major causes of death with Lyme disease is suicide. And I know that there was a moment when you not just contemplated it, but actually took some steps. And obviously, you're here today with us, so it obviously didn't follow through or take place. Do you want to share some of the experiences there?
Yes, absolutely. And it's something that you're right, it is very prevalent in the Lyme community and is not talked about enough, unfortunately, because I don't know which co-infect. I want to say that there's a study that has shown Bartonella maybe
Yeah.
is, has caused like suicidal ideation in multiple studies, but the way it feels is just I mean it overtakes your mind. And that's the worst part is being a young, healthy person and then suddenly not having control over your mind. It feels like you have dementia. It feels like you're drunk. It feels like you're high all the time when you're not. And that's terrifying. And to slowly watch yourself fade away and then having multiple people tell you nothing's wrong with you, and even to have people tell you it's all in your head, it's like, okay, great. That's the problem. That it
Mhm.
is in my head. How can we fix it? Just because it's in my head does not make it less of a valid experience. It does not make it less of how I feel. And I just remember at that time, and I had dealt with depression prior to Lyme, but this was like on a level I had never experienced. It just felt like I couldn't enjoy anything. I had a lot of anhedonia, which is where you don't have pleasure in activities that you typically would enjoy, talking to people that you normally like you love, and you're thinking to yourself, I love this person, like I love this activity. Why do I not feel anything? And that's a really scary thought, to think like I'm not capable of feeling joy. I'm not capable of feeling happiness or hope. And my suicide attempt happened in the context of very severe gut neuroinflammatory gut infections. I had H. pylori among others, and I was very underweight, malnourished, and we had treated the mold, and so I think that kind of brought the Lyme out of hiding. And so it was like ready to be treated, but I still had to convince my parents that I needed Lyme treatment, so I wasn't getting treated. And so all I was getting was all these psychiatric medications, which I was already sensitive to. And all those interactions induced a psychosis where I literally felt like I was not in charge of my body or brain. And the night that I attempted to kill myself, it it really was it was like I was watching myself do it. I was taking pills. I was told by others after the fact that I wrote a letter. I don't remember writing a letter. I don't know what I said. I had to, in the last couple of weeks, actually ask my cousin, who I was living with at the time, to tell me his version of that night, because I couldn't remember. And that was a whole trauma of in and of itself for me to live through and deal with. And I mean, he told me that like Terry said, I had that moment of clarity where I just thought to myself, I snapped out of it. It was like I was in a trance. I snapped out of it, and I went to the bathroom and made myself throw up because I'd taken a bunch of sleeping pills. And I went to lay on my side because I had never had a seizure in the past, but somehow I knew what was coming on was going to be a seizure. And I just told myself, you have to lay on your side right now. And so I laid on my side, and I remember my cat standing over me. And then the next thing I remember, I was in the hospital 4 days later. But what happened in the meantime was I stopped breathing. I almost died, and my cousin, thank God for him, and I'm so grateful that he was there that night and that I was living with him. He gave me CPR, and he said he thought he broke my rib, and he might have bruised my rib, but he had to resuscitate me.
Mhm.
And when I came to in the hospital, they had taken me off of multiple antidepressants,
Mm.
which can induce serotonin syndrome. So that was my first clue that, because even coming to again, I felt like, okay, I'm getting reoriented. Like, what just happened? I felt like I had been drugged
Mhm.
for weeks, and being off of it just in that window gave me enough clarity to identify this is what caused it. And when I looked into it, the medication and then my genetics, which I thankfully had tested, it all checked out. And I should not have been on that medication, but still I was gaslit. And the psychiatrist told me, you're blaming that medication because you don't want to take accountability for what you just did.
Yeah, it's obviously very complicated, and whew, uh,
And
uh,
I just want to point out
yeah,
too that these medications, these psychiatric medications, are given as band-aids. I mean, they do not solve the problem. She had an infectious cause. She also had very physical signs. She was 94 pounds at the time, and she had acne all over her face, like really bad acne, which
Having severe muscle pain. Yep.
yeah, severe muscle pain, all pointing to Bartonella. And in her chapter, I do refer to Dr. Brian Fallon, who talks, he has many studies about the neuropsychiatric effects of Bartonella and tick-borne illness on the brain. And thankfully, Alex did have that little moment of clarity where she broke through and basically saved herself from this. But in our medical society, the first thing we want to do is just give these medicines.
Yep.
And I think that's a huge problem. I think we need to be looking, is there an infectious reason? She had physical symptoms, and that let's try not to do these medicines. Let's try to solve the problem instead of putting a Band-Aid over it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing we all know that we call Lyme the great imitator, and it shows up as so many different things when in reality, it is Lyme. Well, Alex, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for contributing to the book, Being Misdiagnosed, and for just a very thoughtful, well-written chapter on what you went through. And I encourage people to pick up the book. I know, Terry, it's on Amazon and probably wherever it is that you get books. And Terry's also out there as a great advocate, do a lot of work with various publications to get your message out there, including our good friends at LymeDisease.org. We're kind of running low here on time, but Alex, do you want to give us maybe a 20, 30-second final thought on what you want people to know before we wind down here? And then Terry, I'll ask you the same thing.
I think I'll stick with what I said in the book too, which is just Lyme is different for everyone. It's an imitator, and it is also a gift in learning how to trust yourself and really discern what is me, what is Lyme. One time I did an intake, and the paperwork had asked the question, what lie has Lyme told me? And I like to think about that sometimes when I'm looking at my thoughts and how I talk to myself or look back on my 20s, and just what lie has Lyme told me? Like, this isn't me, this is me. And just to stay true to yourself.
Thank you. Terry, you want to give us a final thought?
Yes, my hope with this book is that people will see, if they have chronic illness, they might see themselves in these pages. There's a lot of different chapters that have different types of diagnoses, like ALS, Parkinson's, MS, lupus, psychiatric illnesses. And I'm just hoping that people will pick it up and that they continue searching for answers to never give up and to find better health.
Absolutely. It's a great resource. And I'm excited. We're going to be talking to a couple more people who've participated in the book as well. And we look forward to that. All right. Once again, I want to thank Alex. I want to thank Terri McCormick. My name is Fred Diamond. This is the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast.